we want to take that approach. And my suspicion would be is that the honourable member would concur with that approach.
Thank you, member. The honourable member for Halifax Citadel.
I appreciate the explanation that has been provided, and I want to deal first with your comments about the Halifax Infirmary. I've been through the Halifax Infirmary in one of those bunny suits, is all I can describe them, the police outfits for crime scenes, because of the condition that the building is in on the inside. And sleeping quarters were found on several floors in several locations. Perhaps the 3 people in question chose to sleep in different quarters at different times, but there were clear indications that children were there, based on my own personal observations. And it would be difficult for me to imagine how one could determine that there were just 3 people there. We shouldn't, I can't tell the Honourable Minister what the specific number is. I don't think any better than his people could. If they have some way of describing that the problem only related to 3 people, I'd be interested in knowing that perhaps at another time. I'd like to touch on the 1,500 target, and I'm not sure whether I heard the Minister correctly, but it is no longer clear to me that despite the agreement in 2002 to have 1,500 new units, the government is now suggesting that it may not meet the 1,500 unit target in the time frame that was set out back in September 2002. Very straightforward question. Is it still your intention to partner in those 1,500 units within the time frame that was set out?
Thank you, member. The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
I thank the honourable member for taking me back to that. He had asked a number of questions. One of them was time frame, another one was numbers. The time frame for committing all the monies is March the 31st of 2006 to make full use of the 18.63 federal dollars. That will be done. Those dollars have to be actually expended by March the 31st of 2007, or the equivalent, making reference to the increased rent supplements from the province. Again, with regards to the 1,500, the actual official numbers were 850 to 1,500, and what I've told the honourable member is that I will not go for the higher number if it's at the expense of low-income Nova Scotians that are perhaps in greater need of this. To just elaborate a little bit more about what I understand to be the rationale for the way the federal government structured this program is that there was a lack of apartment starts in the Toronto area, which the member would appreciate is a very large city, and it's almost a different world from what we have here in Nova Scotia. There was so much profit apparently to be gained in the housing market that apartments were being disregarded by the private sector, and this was a way of perhaps tipping the balance to get more apartment development in Toronto. So that's why the $50,000 per unit was structured in the program. But that does not mirror what's going on here in Nova Scotia. The member opposite would know that apartment construction in HRM is brisk, and as such, we're trying to address the needs of Nova Scotians. This may address what needs to happen in Toronto. We want to address what needs to be done in Nova Scotia. So the official figure was 850 to 1,500, and with regards to the inhabitants of the infirmary building, the toys that were left over, I'm advised by those that have had connections not only with people that work for the city and other groups, but also some of the people that I met in my meanderings around North End Halifax, is that there were toys left over from the time that it was a hospital, an active hospital. And I would tell the honourable member that going out and meeting people like the Mayor of Gottingen Street and the de facto Mayor of Gottingen Street and some of these others will enlighten a person considerably about some of the challenges that are faced out there, and particularly as it pertains to shelter and the whole question of affordable housing. So I would say that I get my information, what I consider to be, quite close to the source.
Thank you, Minister, for that. Recognize the honourable member for Halifax Citadel.
Thank you, Minister. I, too, am able to get my information close to the source when I meet with my legal aid clients from years ago who continue to tell me about their circumstances of living on the streets. They continue to live on the streets. I meet them on my walks to school, to work on a regular basis, and they're expressing their great concerns about this problem. In light of the range, I don't want to pursue this much longer. I'd like to turn on to a different subject. I'm wondering whether or not the minister would be able to provide us or provide the House with some indication, given all the planning that he's talked about and the fact that we're halfway through this, of what the forecast is for the number of houses that he expects to be put in place by the end of this agreement. Right now we have this range of 850 to 1,500. We're nowhere near being on a pace even to hit the bottom end of that target, the 850. So I'm left wondering whether or not he has a specific figure. I don't want to pursue that given the limited time that I have left any further. If the minister wants to give a quick response to that, and as I turn to the next topic, I'd be happy to receive that. But specifically, I was looking for a signal of what number do you expect by the end of this program, somewhere between 850 and 1,500. I'd like to turn to the issue that you had referenced early on in relation to the first question that I asked, and that is the Healthy Starts program. Since the late 50s and early 60s, starting in Hawaii, we learned that a Healthy Starts program, a program that identifies in vitro those mothers who look like they may have challenges with children through their years demographically, identify children in preschools who are at risk, identify families who are under some stress, and providing them with the support that they need has turned out to be 95% successful. And the success for the children who are in Healthy Starts programs is a very global one. They do well in education. They do well socially. They do well ultimately in terms of employment. They're less likely to become caught in the cycle of teen pregnancy and all of those other social problems. It is, in the minds of many, one of the best mechanisms that we can find as a society to ensure that the cycle that I'm frankly quite familiar with from having worked in the legal aid system of poverty and single parenthood in part, not to put it all on single parenthood for a moment, but poverty, violence, addictions, all continuing to cycle in small communities and small families. Healthy Starts is one of the best programs, one of the most effective programs, and it's being implemented with vigor in jurisdictions all across North America 40 years after it started. I've been critical of your government, Mr. Minister, for not taking this issue seriously. It doesn't require a significant investment. Considering that we spend about $1 billion a year on education after somebody turns 5 years old up to age 18 or 21, surely we can find the resources, perhaps $10 million, to enhance a Healthy Starts program and make sure that we provide our young people with the real start that they need so that when they hit grade primary, teachers and others have the opportunity to have a whole healthy person.
Thank you, member. The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
I thank the member opposite for his comments and his questions. With regards to the Healthy Beginnings program, that is something that is split between the Department of Health and the Department of Community Services using the early childhood development funds that are flowing from the federal government. Certainly think this was a very positive initiative, again, on the part of the federal government in working with the provinces and becoming partners. And in fact, as they increase their share, they are coming up to the level of the provincial investment, which is something that we welcome. And in my opening comments, the member might remember that I acknowledged the former Minister of Human Resources Development Canada, Jane Stewart, for her leadership in this area, commended her, and I think that her time in that department will leave a very positive legacy for Canada's children and therefore for the entire country. She was passionate about this, and she was able to deliver. With regards to the affordable housing program, it's not entirely broken down to number of units, but the member is looking for a number. That number is clearly going to be determined as we receive the request for proposals and try to find which ones provide best value within the context of what we are trying to accomplish with the program. And the member has heard me say now on several occasions how I am most concerned about low-income Nova Scotians also being able to find affordable housing, whereas the mortgage buy-down of the affordable housing program is really more targeted to middle-income families. But I'm not making any apology for watching out for the most vulnerable in our society. There are 4 components to this. Rental housing comprises 50% of it. There's also rental preservation, because as the member opposite would be well aware, there are too many stories about tenants living in substandard conditions. It's also a concern of the city in particular, although that's not entirely confined to HRM. I've had discussions on numerous occasions with the mayor. They are caught with that dilemma as to do we allow this to continue on, what some would describe as living in squalor in some cases, but if you shut that landlord down, then you may have created indeed a homeless person. So we are working in that regard. So there is the new rental program, there's the rental preservation program, the Crate and Garish is the home ownership in specific areas of urban revitalization, and that has been designated as such. That is the north end of Halifax for that area of the program. And the last is the home ownership. Home preservation. Yeah, and the last component is the home preservation component, and in fact that was announced a couple of months ago, and that's for going beyond the cap for RAP. RAP cuts off at about $16,000. There are some homes that cannot be preserved for just $16,000, and to do so is really just throwing good money after bad. So this steps in there, and for the larger challenges, it provides those sorts of renovations to allow people to continue to live in those homes.
Thank you, Minister. The honourable member for Halifax Citadel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the Minister for that response. Some of the challenges that he faces in ensuring that people have the leg up that they deserve in Nova Scotia are challenges that we all share some responsibility for. And to a certain extent, it brings me back to the comments that I made when I first started my questions with respect to this matter and spoke to the Minister of Community Services, and it resulted in a number of people standing up and speaking about what happened yesterday. And I should say at the outset that with respect to any differences I have with the member for Timberlea Prospect, he and I have had a good relationship in the time that I have been in this House. And I know that he too knows of the significant importance of the issue of special education. And not only special education in the specific, but as it relates to transitioning into community services, as we talked about. But there was in what he said yesterday another lecture about what happened 10 years ago under a Liberal government. And while the member is certainly entitled to say what he wishes, and all members of the NDP, as they from time to time do, have an opportunity to speak about what happened 10 years ago under a Liberal government, I think it's fair to say that for us to move forward, it is important for us to be talking about what happens here and now, and for us to continue to have good relations. And what we found in community services, Mr. Minister, was that there were cutbacks in some respects there under the Savage government, but and there were cutbacks in education. And when, as I referenced, I was a legal aid lawyer here in Halifax, I was one of those people who had my wages cut back. And I was as upset as anybody, as no doubt the member from Timberlea Prospect might have been, as someone in the education system. But what I found when I actually learned more about public policy is that, as Donnie Cameron said shortly before he left office, this province is virtually bankrupt. There were only crumbs left to pick up. And for an extended period of time, this province was on life supports. And it was only through the hard work in difficult times of a government, the Savage government, that kept this province afloat, or we might have been in very different circumstances. And I don't mean this to be a partisan remark. I've only been in this House for less than a year, and I've only been in this venue for 2 years or so. But I recognize when it's important for us to look forward and not to look back. And if we continually look at people like John McCachran and Robbie Harrison, who frankly, in my opinion, and the member from Timberley Prospect may disagree, are people who had true vision about the education system, then we're not going to be able to look forward to what we need to do. They were left with crumbs as a result of what happened for the 15 years before that. Only crumbs. So something desperate had to happen. When you try to do something, as John Savage did and many of his cabinet did, under such difficult circumstances, surely you're going to be controversial, even though you've tried to do something. At least they tried.
Order.
Thank you.
Thank you, member. The time has expired. The Liberal caucus. I will now turn to the honourable member and recognize the honourable member for Dartmouth South, Portland Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate this opportunity to go back to the issue I was discussing at the end of my first hour, and that was on care options for high-needs children and youth in care. I see in the new business plan that one of the objectives under Family and Children's Services is stable placement of children in care. And the number of children placed outside the province, the figures are given. In 1999, there were 25, 2000, 28, 2001, 32, 2002, 29, 2003, 24, but the number's missing for 2004, and I was wondering, I realize we're still in 2004, but are there any January or March figures available? It's kind of, the objective is to decrease this by 15%, but if we don't know what base figure we're working with, it's difficult to know what the objective is. Thank you.
Thank you, member. The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
I am looking at my communications director in the gallery, and I'm going to ask her if she can try to find out what the current number is of children that are placed in care outside the province since those numbers that you have referenced in the business plan.
Thank you, Minister. The Honourable Member for Dartmouth South, Portland Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Minister, perhaps there are going to be some other questions on some of the other objectives in the business plan for this year, and none of them seem to have the 2004 figures. So I'll just give you a heads up that I will be asking for some of those figures as well. I want to go on and talk a bit about the confusion in designation of the placements where a young person in care can be put. And I realize I've only been the critic for 9 months, and as the Minister well recognizes, he has a very complex department, a number of programs and services serving the most vulnerable in our province. And it's at times confusing. In terms of placements for young people in care, I've heard terms such as licensed, approved, regulated child caring facility, and others mentioned. And I would at some time like to get an actual written description of what these terms refer to and what the process is for actually being designated, approved, licensed, or regulated sometime. So I don't expect an answer from that from you today on that. And I'm also wondering where I would find, if there are any specific requirements or definitions around the qualifications for the care workers in each of those categories and the age of young person that would be served by those child caring facilities. Okay, that's a rhetorical question, actually.
Thank you, Member. The Minister of Community Services.
And to answer the member's question, is absolutely there are stipulations as to what would qualify a person to work in various settings, and clearly what's appropriate for, say, a young child may not be appropriate for a youth, and vice versa, and that we do try to separate them. So we will get that information for the member, and we have actually have a student that's out on work experience here today with her communications director, and she has been busily writing down your queries while our communications director was out trying to get the last answer. I just want to touch base on your first point about the number of children in care outside of the province. While the Wood Street Centre certainly will greatly reduce the number that have to leave the province, there are some cases that are of such a nature that we're just never going to have enough children or youth in that category to provide that sort of specialized services. So there will always be some children, regrettably, that have to leave the province because of the severity of the behavioral or emotional challenges they face, and it's quite something sometimes to get the files and hear that you need to have two adults accompanying them to their to the organization that's going to provide them with care, whether it's in Maine or Ontario or whatever, wherever. But regretfully, some of the challenges are considerable.
Thank you, Minister, for that response. The Minister has agreed in undertaking to provide some of the information you're asking for. The Honourable Member for Dartmouth South, Portland Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I appreciate your description of what actually is the purpose of Wood Street, but I think part of the problem is that there was an expectation that because high-risk youth and children could be accommodated up to I believe it's 9 months at this facility, 90 days perhaps. It's well beyond the 30-day limit. It'd be interesting to see, now that it's open, how many young people have been kept for just the 30 days and then transferred, and how many have had an extended sort of assessment treatment period. Because I think part of the problem is there aren't options available for these young people when they come out of Wood Street Centre to have sort of the specialized treatment within the province. So it'd be interesting to see if this actually does decrease any of the numbers of youth and children who have to go to programs elsewhere in Canada or in the States. I want to talk about the Special Needs Emergency Response Team, SNERT, I believe it's called. It was originally set up in Spryfield to provide short-term emergency placement for teens. And I understand that one of the young clients served by this particular response team was a young child. So I'm wondering, has the mandate for this particular team been expanded from youth to also include children?
Thank you, Member. The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
I thank the Honourable Member for question. I'm not as familiar with that program as the Honourable Member, but I see my Communications Director has just got up and left her chair, so I suspect that an answer will be forthcoming momentarily.
Thank you, Minister. The Honourable Member for Dartmouth South, Portland Valley.
Yes, I'd like to move on to childcare facilities. The objective in the last two business plans has been to increase the number and percentage of trained staff in full-time, full-day childcare centres in the province. And again, the figure for this year is missing. But I understand that by April of last year, 933 full-time staff had been trained, and I noticed that your objective for this year is to maintain the same level for 04-05 as in 02-03 at 85%. Are you satisfied with that maintenance level? I'm just wondering why it's not being increased.
Thank you, Member. The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And understanding that just by the nature of any profession, that there's always going to be turnover. So 85% basically means 17 out of 20 meet that level of professionalism. And given often the age of the people that are going into that program and the likelihood that some may leave for a time to have children of their own, it would be expected that there's going to be a certain amount of turnover. And clearly when people first enter, they may not all have that qualifications. And clearly where experience is part of getting that qualification, that would account for some of the 15%.
Thank you, Minister. The Honourable Member for Dartmouth South Portland Valley, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I just find it strange that once a child enters the public school system, the qualifications for teachers, it's a 100% requirement. And under the age of 5, obviously, the department is satisfied, different department, mind you, is satisfied with 85%. And I do appreciate that when these changes came into effect, there was the need to sort of grandfather or grandmother in some of the staff who perhaps hadn't had an opportunity to be trained before they started their jobs. But I'm just wondering, excuse me, why new staff wouldn't be required to have the training.
Thank you, Member. The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
We're clearly, in order to meet your professional potential, you're going to need to have some experience. At some point in time, you've got to have your first day on the job. The member makes reference to the public school system, but even in the public school system, there are volunteers in there, just volunteer parents and other caring people. So it's not like 100% of the people in the public school system all have their Bachelor of Education degrees or their teaching certificates. So I think the important thing is that the Early Childhood Development Program recognized that there was a problem with turnover in the area of childcare. The $4,000 that is the wage subsidy that was brought in as the first measure under the Early Childhood Development Agreement was meant to try to make it sufficiently attractive so that those that wanted to pursue that career as professional childcare workers were not driven out because they couldn't afford to stay in the profession. So I think 85% has brought a level of stability that was probably unthought of just a very few years ago. This is a happy story, and again, one that reflects directly on the Early Childhood Development Program.
Thank you, Minister. The Honourable Member for Dartmouth South Portland Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think you'll find that any staff in the public school system who have direct responsibility for children are fully trained from day one. It would be interesting to see perhaps how many administrators and cooks and people serving in sort of secondary, non-direct care of children are included in that 15%, but perhaps we can talk about that later. I guess my overall concern is that while the department talks about wanting to stabilize the child care sector in Nova Scotia, that the objectives and the measures that are suggested in your business plan are very small steps towards that. And I'm concerned that because of the vulnerability of the sector these days, 2 nonprofit daycares have closed, one in my own constituency and one in Halifax Atlantic. And I understand that Alexandra Children's Centre is having problems in terms of location. Their lease is up and they have nowhere to move. That 3 very large sort of mainstays of the child care sector in Nova Scotia have either closed or are facing closure. And I just would like to see more aggressive action on the part of the department in terms of providing the supports and the targets that are necessary to provide security for parents in Nova Scotia that we're going to have a quality childcare system. For example, in the business plan, you also talk about spaces in full-time licensed childcare centers. Again, the 2004 figures are missing, but it suggested that the department wants to increase the base by 5%, which I suggest in view of the closures is a very low target. I would like to move on and ask the minister, are you satisfied that there's enough money in this new budget to, and I'm going back to an earlier question of this morning, to increase the per diems and the subsidies and the spaces and all those factors that have been long studied and are recognized as essential items in terms of providing more stability and reassurance for the sector and the Nova Scotian families that the child cares serve.
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member opposite for her caring about the children and the families that are served by the child care sector. And again, I'm going to make reference to the federal government joining with the provinces and territories and pointing out that over the last 3 years there's been a virtual doubling of the resources put into this area as a result of the Early Childhood Development Program. The province was always there, but it's the federal government that has come on the scene and augmented these programs. So I would suggest to you that a doubling of the resources in a 3-year period is a very significant number, especially in light of all the other financial pressures that provincial governments face. So to answer your question, I think the appropriate steps have been taken, and specifically it is nice to be in a situation with the accelerated $2.2 million from the Early Learning and Child Care Program to actually be able to wait for the consultant's report to come back on an expedited basis to make sure that $900,000 will accomplish what it is that we want to accomplish and still have some discretion, hopefully, to address maybe things like startup and expansion grants, which conceivably might be of assistance to one of the child care centers that you referenced before. But I also want to make the point that 2 of the child care centers that closed, the nonprofit ones, and child care centers open and close throughout the year. I mean, there's a flow. We may lose 20, but we pick up 20. Or we may lose 15 and pick up 20. It's not like there are not new centers coming on stream. And in the case of those 2, I mean, they had designated, subsidized seats that were remaining vacant. And I know in the case of one, a lot of the children moved down the street, and they're very happy in this commercial center. And I'm advised that they're not wanting to move again. So it's not been a totally negative story from the point of view of all the families. Although I do regret the closure of the centers, many of the families have made provision, and they've moved on, and we've allowed the subsidy to follow them.
Dartmouth South, Portland Valley.
Well, this could develop into a couple-hour discussion. I just would like to say that these 2 centers, I know the one in my constituency had been there for 25 years. I believe they were both started when federal funding was made available back in the early 1970s. And they've served their communities long and well. And it's been the accumulation of serious underfunding by the provincial government that led them to the stage where they had to actually close. I'm wondering, you talk about the infusion of new federal dollars going into child care in this province. Do you actually have a breakdown of the current amount of money being spent on child care centers in Nova Scotia, and what percentage comes from the federal multilateral program, and how much comes from the provincial budget?
The hon- The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Early Childhood Development Initiatives funding programs total $39.1 million. 19.5 is federal, and 19.6 is provincial, bearing in mind that some of that federal money goes in the Healthy Beginnings program, which is administered through the Department of Health, and we certainly welcome that part of the initiative, because we think that that's a critical investment in our children and their families, and the member from Halifax Citadel was quite articulate about that during his hour.
The Honourable Member from Dartmouth South, Portland Valley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I may come back to daycares, but I do want to move on to transition houses, women's centers, and men's treatment programs. I understand that approximately $43,000 new dollars are being shared by all those programs in the new budget compared to the last year's forecast. And I'm just wondering, is there any rationale on how you chose that figure, and how is this going to relieve their financial stress?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We are having a discussion as to what was the reason for the $43,000. I would tell the member opposite that there was a verbal agreement that was made between the transition houses and the men's treatment centers some years ago that their wages would mirror the increases in the civil service. I was wondering whether that perhaps accounted for the $43,000, and I'm not able to confirm that that's the case, but the honourable member would know that we did increase the funding to transition houses and men treatment centers by 9.3% last year to implement that commitment made by a former verbal commitment made by a former deputy minister. So we will check out and confirm whether that is the reason for the additional $43,000.
Member from Dartmouth South, Portland Valley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Continuing with this topic, there's been concerns that the department response to the reports by the transition houses, women's centers, and men's treatment programs that were required as part of the agreement to have that funding put back in. I think it was cut a couple of years ago, and in return for having the funding put in, they were asked to do an analysis of the programs that they offer, whether, I think it was to check to see whether there was any duplication and to sort of justify the amount of money they were getting. And they submitted those reports within the last year. And after a delay, the department did respond to them. The department response did not seem to focus on any of the recommendations made in those reports. And instead, the department response was more around perhaps an intent to regionalize these services. There was the department wanted to talk to the chairs of the boards rather than the chairs supported by their staff person. There were other issues like that. It seemed to be an avoidance tactic. So I'm wondering why in this budget is the department not dealing with the key recommendations of stable funding from those groups?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
I would point out that the member identified a $43,000 increase in that line item. And so while that may not be stable funding, that is in fact increased funding. So I would suggest that while the amount may be modest, it certainly is following through on our commitment to the transition houses and the men's treatment centers. With regards to the member's comments about the special nature of each community, there is an evolving pattern across the province that the transition houses, unfortunately, in the city, the capital, are getting more business than we'd like to see them receive. We'd like to see them not have anybody in need of their services, but in fact there is more pressure on the Halifax service providers, whereas in the regions there's a recognition that we need more of an outreach approach because the vacancy rates in some of them are dropping, and so that's a chance to work with the transition houses across the province to see if we can channel monies that will deliver more to the battered women and their children. And after all, that is what we're here to do. Honourable Member, I have an answer to your earlier question, courtesy of Kathy McIsaac, Communications Director. You were asking the question about statistics on out-of-province placement for children and why the numbers were not in there for March the 31st of 2004. And the statistics are collected on a quarterly basis by the regions, and then they're sent in to head office. So that is why there's a delay. As of December the 31st of 2003, it was 25, and that would have been just after we opened the Truro facility. But I want to caution the member that the opening of the Truro facility should not be allowed to interrupt the established treatment programs that are in place for those out-of-province children. So any potential drop in the future will be gradual, hopefully as those children successfully complete their programs and are able to return home to Nova Scotia.
The Honourable Member from Dartmouth South, Portland Valley.
Thank you. I just want to remind the Minister that the $43,000 that I'm talking about is going to be spread among 9 transition homes, 7 women's centers, and 6 intervention programs for abusive men. So that just roughly works out to about $2,000 per program. So I hardly think that's going to be an improvement on their balance statement. As the Minister realizes, many of the services provided by these organizations are considered essential or mandated under the legislation, and the government would have to provide them if the voluntary sector wasn't doing it. And I would like to suggest from my experience, and I think many people in this legislature, that transition houses and women's centers and the men's treatment programs are being delivered in a very cost-effective manner. In terms of regionalization, I just want to point out that the Halifax Regional Municipality doesn't even have a women's center. So that's a dangerous road I think we tread if we're looking at regionalizing services, unless there's actually an infrastructure that's similar across the province based on the population. So when 1/3 the population doesn't even have a women's center, I think that's a very dangerous road to be going down. So again, I'm asking, excuse me, why isn't the department dealing with the challenges facing this particular group of service providers instead of continually delaying action?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Trying to catch on to all the members' points, and I'm going to start with her comment about the women's centers. One of the challenges we face in this department, and we're trying to work with our federal counterparts, particularly in HRDC or the two successor departments, is that we've got a situation where the federal government will recognize that there's perhaps a legitimate need in the community. They will come up, they will announce project funding, they'll set it up, and after the funding walks away, they more or less throw the community the keys and say, you know, it's yours, prove that there's a need for the service, and then they just board up the doors and they just will say no, or maybe they'll let it continue on for a few months, but ultimately what they've done is they've taken an opportunity to recognize something which is a good service, but they've done it without any intention of being there for the long term. This is a problem from our point of view. We are conscientiously trying to deliver what we consider to be a secure safety net, a sustainable safety net, and having other people make those decisions and then leave the community in the lurch is a problem. In this case, I'm being very critical of the federal government, not unlike what they did with Medicare many years ago. You know, we went in on a 50-50 arrangement, and you know, we've now got them back up to 16, and it's probably going to be less than 16 this year because they basically capped it again. So the women's centers actually flowed out of HRDC initiatives, and it was the province that stepped in and provided some funding for them. And in the case of the Yarmouth one, the minister at the time for Southwest Nova, you know, I'm sure was there for the ribbon cutting, but the federal minister at the time, Robert Thibault, but when it came time to actually step in and take responsibility for the ongoing operational funding, it was the local member, now Minister Hulbert, who was the champion for them. And yes, we did pick them up to the tune of $100,000. But this is not a way to initiate these programs. You should not be promising things to people unless you're prepared to stand by them. And that has been an ongoing problem with the federal government, and something that we've spoken to them about, and we hope that we will work together better in the future so that sustainability can be a key part of the announcement. Now, you made reference to the funding of the transition houses. I want to tell you that the need for transition houses, or I'm going to suggest, and I guess it's probably not my role to tell you anything, but I'm going to suggest that the need for transition houses, unfortunately, is a reflection of the problems that we have in society. In order to reach out and make the community better aware of these challenges, there's no better way of doing it than to have an active association in the Valley. We've got Chrysalis House, the former executive director who actually ran for your party on 2 occasions, and I would say distinguished herself and your party in her campaigns, was a great advocate for the women's centers, or excuse me, for the transition house. And as a result of that, there are many people that contribute on an annual basis, such as they can, and I would tell you that you're looking at one of them, to that center. And by doing that, by reaching out, it becomes an education process. It makes us more aware that this problem's going on, that bad things do happen to women and children, and that there has to be some provision there to take care of them. So I would suggest that by doing it in this manner, it provides much greater benefits than just writing a check from the Department of Community Services to the transition house. Even though we fund the vast majority of their operating budgets, they still make a very constructive contribution, not only financially, but perhaps more importantly, by informing the community that there is a problem and that we should all collectively be vigilant in addressing the challenge of violence against women and children.
The honourable member from Dartmouth South, Portland Valley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have to say I take exception to your remarks. There you go. To suggest that transition houses who are serving women and their children who have faced abuse in their homes, that those boards and staff should be out begging for funds in their community to provide necessary services, I think is offensive. There's also inequity in the province because a lot of communities don't have the fundraising capacity that other communities have. Nor, I would suggest, are transition houses often the popular cause in a community. And so we would have a very ineffective, unequal system across the province where communities where perhaps the economy is a little better might be able to support these facilities, and lower economically based communities would not be able to. To think that this government, and I'm not sure actually when it happened, but I know there was a family violence prevention initiative that was canceled, and I wouldn't be surprised it actually had been during the Liberal regime. These community groups are trying to pick up the slack after government has refused to take its responsibility, and to suggest that this is, good for them to be able to reach out and directly ask for money in the community is just beyond my understanding. I'm going to leave it at that, but these are organizations that are protecting women and children, that are providing essential services. A woman in Yarmouth or Advocate Harbour should not have fewer services in this regard because perhaps their boards of directors cannot provide the money available from the community. And as well, part of the problem is the outdated funding formula that's used for these organizations. It's based on a per diem, assuming that all women and children seeking these services are actually going to move into the transition house and stay there overnight. And the minister himself referred to the outreach initiatives that a lot of these transition houses and women's centers are undertaking. And that reflects particularly the needs of rural women and families. They don't have as easy access to public transportation, if there's even any. So they can't get into these facilities, and so it's important to have the services and programs going where they happen to live so that they can access them during the day, not necessarily stay overnight, and receive the help and support that they need to turn their lives around. So I would suggest that the department needs to take a serious look at the provision of services by these organizations and make sure that there's some stable long-term funding for them to lurch from year to year, not knowing if their programs or their staff are going to be in place, places an unbearable burden on those volunteers and staff, and I think it's quite unnecessary. I want to move on to an issue that I brought up yesterday during question period, and that is the lack of ability of women and men on social assistance to get a university education. I'm particularly concerned about how this impacts on women, because it's been proven in Canadian research that women who graduate from high school and go into the job market earn much lower salaries, wages, than men who graduate and go into often the skilled blue-collar sector, where the salaries and wages are considerably higher than the jobs that most women go into. And research has been done in Canada to suggest that women with a bachelor's degree actually earn 50 to 80% more than those with a high school leaving certificate. So that women just graduating from high school have a much bleaker future, and this impacts significantly on their children. So I don't understand the rationale of dropping women and men from social assistance if they choose to go on to university, because I think it's cost neutral in that if their benefits continue, they would then apply for student loans to cover the educational books and educational related costs. They would then bear the responsibility of paying back those amounts after they graduate. So this would only impact on a few of the people actually receiving social assistance, because not all people would want to have the qualifications or have the motivation to go on to university. But it's an excellent way to break this poverty cycle. And so I'm wondering, is the minister considering changing his mind and bringing back the opportunity for men and women on social assistance to pursue university education, so that they can break this poverty cycle and be able to support their families and be productive citizens in our province?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Honourable Member, you've brought up 3 points I would like to speak to here. First of all, I'd like to go back to your point about the fundraising and the part of the transition houses. In fact, all organizations that provide valuable services in the community. Honourable Member, I want to tell you that I will support 3 causes every year. And I'm proud to go out and do that, to knock on doors, to be an advocate for those valuable services in the community. People appreciate it. And when asked in the right manner, they do want to give. I do understand what you're referring to when you say the point of begging, because until you've got it in your own head that it is an appropriate thing to do, it may be difficult. I have a friend of mine who is the executive director of L'Arche, wonderful organization in Wolfville. She sent me a letter, and in essence, she was encouraging contributions at the end of the year. And I felt that she was being too submissive in her letter, that she should be proud of the service that they were providing. And I called her up and I said, you need not apologize. Of course I would like to contribute to L'Arche. It's an honor to be asked to do so. And if asked properly, a lot of other people, and I suspect that you would be one of them, would be happy to do so for a like organization in your community. This is a chance as well for the transition houses to augment the service delivery, because we do fund the fundamentals. And the member might be aware or might not be aware that on April the 1st, 1998, the province uploaded the cost of the transition houses and the men's treatment centres. Previously, as I understand it, the province funded only 75%, and the municipalities were supposed to fund the balance. And you mentioned per diems and other methods that they could do this by. But in actual fact, the level of commitment from the various municipalities did vary across the province. But using that as a barometer of the support for the community, we uploaded the entire amount. So if the municipality wanted to fund them at 103%, which was the case, I think, with one of them, in actual fact, that then became their annual operating grant. Last year, we added 9.3% to that for a wage increment for the staff. I think that we've been more than supportive of transition houses and men's treatment centers. And with regards to the women's centers, again, the federal government was walking away from them, and in 7 occasions we have stepped in there and we've made it part of our annual operating budget to the tune of $700,000. I think these are very significant commitments on the part of the province. You brought up the question of a maximum of 2 years post-secondary education for clients on employment support and income assistance. Implicitly in your comments, you recognize that we do support clients to go to community college, to get them up to a level where they can have some sort of professional career. The community college, which is something that this government is investing millions of dollars in the expansion, because that is an area where there is a tremendous demand for the graduates, and a growing demand. And I think a lot of the future is going to emanate from the graduates of the community college, or at least a lot of the future job demands. So there is a recognition there that we will take our clients and we'll work with them, we'll help them get their senior matriculation, and then we'll support them beyond that in conjunction with Human Resources Development Canada or their successor departments, who will pay the tuition for the community college. We pick up the room and board and other living expenses, which is the lion's share of it. But again, where I can be critical at times of the federal government for some of their programs where they start things and then abandon them, I want to compliment them here for the working relationship that we have with them in working with social assistance clients and trying to put them through educational programs that give them that start to bring them up to a level where, if after going out and starting that job, they then would be in a position where, like everybody else, they could then apply for university, take out the student loans. Yesterday in question period, this question came up again on the floor, or maybe it was Wednesday, and I made reference to an example of perhaps a single parent, 2 children. By the time you get $6,000 in for the National Child Benefit, if they apply for public housing, that could easily be an $8,000 a year benefit. Subsidized child care for 2 children, you're looking at approximately $8,000 of value there. Plus you've got an interest-deferred student loan, $10,000, actually over $10,000, because that's an income-tested program. So you got $22,000 in a direct grant to support that family unit so that the parent can go to university. That's a substantial investment on the part of both the federal and the provincial governments, and indeed the municipal governments, because through the affordable housing, the public housing, the municipalities pay what, 1/8 of the cost of the deficit. They make a contribution as well to public housing, be it a smaller one, but still an important one. So there's significant supports that are there for single parents that wish to go to university. And in addition to that, should they not be able to get employment between their semesters, the start and the end and the start of the new year, they could possibly qualify to get their room and board covered through social assistance again. So it's not that they're cut off for sure, it's just during the time that they're university, when their student loan is not only supposed to cover their tuition, but also the parents' room and board. So I would suggest that we do make a very significant investment in single parents, or it is available to them. And I would also like to point out that if we were to say that it is appropriate to cover the room and board, because that's what we're talking about, it's the ongoing costs of the client, not the children, because the children still get the National Child Benefit. We stopped that practice in Nova Scotia. We are one of the provinces that has stopped that practice. That still flows through to support the child for food and clothing. But what in essence you're suggesting is that the food and shelter components, which is covered in the student loan, should continue and allow them to stay on social assistance. And to that, you've got to answer the question, maybe you have a son or a daughter that's interested in going to university someday. I'm not Sure, if you have children, I suspect you do, and I don't know whether they're university age yet, but if that was the case, if they're working 3 summer jobs, and part of that is not only to cover the tuition, but the food and shelter costs of going to university, is it right that they should have to work 3 jobs in the summer to raise that same sum of money, and somebody else, by virtue of the fact that they're on a provincial program, should get it for free? I mean, that's the question. And if you do it for one, should we not be doing it for everyone?
The honourable member from Dartmouth South, Portland Valley.
Well, you raise a number of points. I'm not going to respond to all of them. But even the 2-year cutoff for community colleges forces clients on social assistance to go into the programs that pay lower wages when they come out. There are a lot of 3-year programs that these people are not eligible for because of their 3 years rather than 2. It's a huge issue. You compare it to other university-age children, and I appreciate the compliment that I might have university-aged children. Actually, my children are much older than that, but thank you. I think we have a responsibility to be taking a longer-term look at the people we're trying to encourage to become self-sufficient and independent through the programs of the Community Services Department. And I really think that this one, what we're doing is forcing people to stay on social assistance, basically for the sake of the family income, or to take a short-term educational program that will then probably encourage them, force them to come back into the cycle of dependence on social assistance. But I realize I only have about 10 minutes left, and I want to move on to another area of concern. And that's employment support and income assistance. According to the impact report, which I think you're familiar with, it was produced by the Community Advocates Network in partnership with the Nova Scotia Association of Social Workers last year. This particular program, Employment Support and Income Assistance, doesn't provide enough money for daily necessities. The rates are lower than the family benefits under the former 2-tier system that you referred to earlier. And the shelter rate of $225 for a single employable person is actually 30% less than the previous rate. Even your business plan from last year recognized that vacancy rates are down in Metro and rents are up. So increasing numbers of employment support and income assistance clients cannot find safe, affordable, or appropriate housing. It's resulting in a higher percentage of their income being used for rents, and that's often coming out of their food budget. So I'm wondering, why is the department not adjusting its rates to help with this situation? And how are recipients expected to cover actual costs of basic food, clothing, personal care, shelter, phone, regular dental and eye care? I understand emergency treatment is covered, school supplies, etc.
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Member, I share your passion in this area, and it's something that we have been discussing for some months now prior to the creation of the budget. But before I delve into the adequacy of the social assistance rates, the employment support and income assistance rates, I would like to point out, with regards to the previous subject, and you were talking about employment support, the other half of the program is that before August the 1st of 2001, in essence, the employment support component of the budget was, for all intents and purposes, non-existent. And this year, we're projecting something like $16 million being invested in that area, just depending on how you want to account for it. But if you look on page 411, the first 3 lines are all employment support, And I think that even if you discount the head office contribution, which is still a very legitimate contribution because that's where policy and other things emanate from, that is, I think, a very progressive step in assisting our clients towards a career, and there's many other things besides education that comes under that. And as the member would be aware, the employment support counselor works with not only the client, but in some cases with the employers, could be with the schools in the local area, to assist that client in reaching his or her potential. So I think that implicitly your comments you agree with the approach that there should be more employment support, and in fact there's dramatically more today than what was there just some 3 years ago. With regards to the adequacy of the rates, the basic personal allowance is $180, as the member would be aware. I'm not very happy with that number, and I brought it forward to my colleagues. I made some arguments that it should be larger. I understand that it has been stuck there for something like 10 years, and the honourable member, I know, will be pleased to hear that there is a very modest amount which I want to kick in October the 1st of $4 as an adjustment to everybody's basic personal allowance. It's not a tremendous amount. I'd rather do it August the 1st than just have it $2 spread over the year, because I want to have the forward-going amount into the next year pegged at $184, and then we'll continue to work on that to make sure that there's some acknowledgement about addressing the cost of living. You brought up legitimate arguments about shelter costs in some parts of the province where the rental market is somewhat hotter. It's not confined just to HRM. Wolfville and Antigonish also have the same problem, and there we are trying to deal with the question of differential shelter allowances, because across the province, why should somebody in Guysborough have a different shelter allowance than somebody living in HRM? And I guess that we're trying to overcome that philosophical challenge to get to what you're referring to. Of the some 32,000 cases that we still have with community services, about 12,000 of them are at their maximum shelter allowance. Implicitly in that, it means that 20,000 are not using their maximum shelter allowance. So that's where we are there, but I do agree that there is a challenge. It is something that I've directed my department to look into, and please come forward with a recommendation. And there are other points that you made in terms of where social assistance recipients are today vis-a-vis under the former municipal social assistance programs and the family benefits programs. Those people that would have been negatively impacted by the new program were grandfathered at their own old rates. So your argument would only apply to new clients, not former clients. And that grandfathering remains in place. But it should also be pointed out, in fairness, that some of those that were on the old rates are doing dramatically better under the new program. And again, going back to my opening statements, we are spending just as much today, basically, in employment support and income assistance as we were a few years ago, even though there are 16% fewer clients. So the clients that remain are sharing the same budget, and I think that that's a very progressive reflection on the work of this government and this department.
Honourable member from Dartmouth South, Portland Valley.
Thank you for your comments, Minister, but I think some of the reports from your own department suggest that the core group of people remaining on income assistance are ones facing complex multiple problems, and their needs are probably much higher than the average need spread out over perhaps even 3 or 4 years ago, because you've been able to move a lot of people from social assistance over to the employment support side, and as you have indicated, many of them have been able to go on and become productive residents. Just referring back briefly to the adequacy of the rates, you're probably aware, because I asked this question in the House, I believe, last fall, the Metro Food Bank Society of Nova Scotia put out a press release in October last fall indicating that there'd been an increase in food bank clients in Nova Scotia by 9.9% over the year before, and that the total since 1997 has been an increase of over 25%. And these figures are the results of a study done by what's called Hunger Count. Every province except Manitoba has actually had more people turning to food banks for assistance over the past year. I haven't been able to get the figures, but I would suspect a fair percentage of the people going to the food banks across Nova Scotia are people also receiving social assistance payments. And you know, I think it's pretty desperate when the government can't even provide a basic level of care to the most needy residents of this province. So I do encourage you to continue to add to the daily rates, and certainly I'm not sure how far $4 is going to go with the increase in cost, but I hope you look at that very seriously over the coming year. Do I have 1 minute left? Done? Okay, thank you.
The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I guess I want to start off by looking at the budget addressed. Looking at the budget address, Madam Chair, we learned that the government is looking at increasing the budget of the department by a little over $27 million this year. With this increase, the budget of the department they're now looking at $694 million. Looking at page 25 of the budget that was delivered here roughly 2 weeks ago, the government, the Minister of Finance, announced that they would be increasing the personal allowance for people on income assistance at a cost of $1 million starting in October. And then the government goes further, indicating that they're looking at increasing this amount next year's budget in 2005-2006 by $2 million extra. So I guess I'll start off by asking the minister if the personal allowance set right now at $180, is that a province-wide policy, that everyone on income assistance is receiving $180?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
That is the provincial rate for the basic personal allowance right across the province. Yes.
The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Again, maybe the minister could indicate, first of all, the personal allowance, as I understand, covers food for a month for that individual, covers clothing if there's any needs for clothing. I guess what I'm trying to find out from the minister is, first, exactly what this personal allowance is supposed to cover within that 30-day period. And, okay, we'll start with that one, please.
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Would the honourable member like a breakdown as to the amounts that are supposed to be assigned to the various components? Actually, the $4 amount that I referenced with the previous speaker brings the food component up to $135, which is the market value measure for what was to be a healthy diet. I find it hard to comprehend that one can do that for $135, but that was done by an independent group that came up with that number, and the differential was $4. So bringing that forward as a case for increasing the basic personal allowance, that's where the $4 came from. The balance is for clothing and other personal effects. And if the honourable member would allow me to indulge just a little bit in the previous member's closing comments, because they tie in very much with his own, is that she made reference to the growing use of food banks, which is a concern. And I would tell both honourable members, I would tell all Nova Scotians that the Premier actually came to me and said, look, is there something that we can do to assist the food banks? And actually the honourable members would probably both know that what the food banks wanted us to do was to increase the basic personal allowance, and it has been done.
The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Again, maybe the Minister could give us some type of indication or breakdown. Starting this October, the department is looking at investing an additional $1 million into increasing personal allowances. So the Minister makes reference to $4. I don't know what he's talking about, so maybe when the Minister takes the floor again, he could elaborate. First of all, where the department is looking at spending this $1 million increase. Two, exactly how much more money will be going in the personal allowance. So we know right now, province-wide, we're looking at $180. So is the department looking at increasing that by $4 to $184 to individuals? So maybe the Minister could explain or clarify exactly what the department's looking at doing.
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Honourable Member. And it's interesting that you asked that question, because when I was asking staff about the cost of increasing the basic personal allowance, a lot of the questions that you brought up were also raised by staff, and we had a little bit of a discussion, and this is where we ended up with the extra $1 million to increase all adult social assistance recipients' monthly budget by, in essence, $4. So every adult on social assistance will get another $4 effective October the 1st of 2004. Children are covered under the National Child Benefit. There has been substantial increases for low-income families early on in our mandate through the Nova Scotia Child Benefit Supplement, and more recently with the annual increases in the federal component, which with the elimination of the clawback now flow through to the children. So this is addressing our adult clients, and the increase in the National Child Benefit flows through to address the cost of living for their children. With regards to the amount of the $4, currently we're coming in at $131, and I have been advised by this independent organization that $135 is the right amount, and I took the $1 million and I wanted to start it on October the 1st. Instead of putting $2 a month right throughout the year, I wanted to increase the threshold so that going into the next year, that triggered the $2 million in the following year.
The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party.
Madam Chair, again to the Minister. He indicated that the personal allowance will be going up by $4. I guess what I'm trying to find out, how many, he did make reference to adults that are currently on income assistance. Maybe the Minister could indicate how many adults are currently on the program. Two, if we are providing a $4 increase starting October, will that basically include the $1 million as the government has announced earlier?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
I thank the honourable member for his question. If he would accept 32,800 as the approximate caseload today, and we are checking to see if we can get an actual number of adults in that number, because clearly some cases may represent more than one person in the family unit. So we're digging to see if we can get the adult caseload.
The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party.
So again, as I understand, everyone on income assistance starting in October will be receiving $4 more. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. The minister indicates that this $135 or $4 increase is the right amount. Could the minister indicate who is it department staff? Is it an independent agency that has indicated that $135 a month for food is the right amount? I missed out earlier when the minister was talking about this $4 increase, so I'm trying to understand the background, where this $4 came from, or who proposed it.
Minister of Community Services.
I thank the honourable member for the question, a very reasonable question. The $135 is referred to as the market value measure, and I'm asking staff to please come up with the name of this national organization that did the studies that reached that number.
The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party.
Thank you. You know, looking at the market up value as the minister made reference to, you know, $4 increase a month, you know, how many cents more a day?
13.
You know, I think it would even be better to see what exactly is these people supposed to be living on or eating. I would be interested in looking at the menu or the food choices that's being suggested for these 32,800 Nova Scotians. So I'm just curious if the minister has any details on what the department is suggesting for these people to live on in the run of a month on $135 to live on food. We know that, and I'm sure all members of this House hears all the time, people on income assistance, you know, calling their MLA. You know, one, they don't have enough, they need more. I know many different charity organizations, many service groups. I know in our area, I was talking with the past president of the Metegan Lions Club just last weekend. He indicated in the last, from November to the end of March, I believe, they spend over $30,000 in helping individuals that are on income assistance for oil, for all kinds of special requests. So when I hear that the department is looking at providing an increase of 13 cents a day to over 32,000 Nova Scotians, you know, again, I would like the minister to, maybe he has the information where this $4 increase a month, 13 cents a day increase, what it's supposed to look after. So maybe the minister could provide the committee with some information on that, please.
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Again, I thank the member opposite, and I would reference to my opening comments that I in no way was suggesting that $4 was a huge increase in the basic personal allowance, but I am suggesting that it's about the first one in 10 years, and so therefore it's welcome, and it's something that I hope becomes part of the annual review of the department's budget. With regards to where it came from, again, it did not come from the Department of Community Services. It's a market value measure. I'm going to get the name of the national organization, and what they did is that they had people go around, do grocery shopping, try to come together with healthy diets and cooking, and through, I would say, a great deal of ability, having a great deal of ability, that somehow or other they were able to produce a healthy diet for $135 a month. Again, I felt that when this was announced that this would possibly be the reaction, and I cautioned my cabinet colleagues that this is something for which we would probably be criticized for, even though for the first time in 10 years we are increasing the basic personal allowance. No matter what the amount of the increase, we knew that it would attract criticism, and I'm willing to accept that criticism.
Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party.
Again, Madam Chair, we're all aware of some individuals that are on special diets. I'm just curious, in order to help these individuals because of probably illness or because of personal situations where these individuals or some of these individuals are on special diets, are our personal allowances, I guess what I'm trying to find out, earlier I had asked the minister if there were exceptions to the $180 personal allowance. I know of a few in my area that are on special diets. Is that additional money that's provided? I guess that would be the first question. Is there additional money provided to these individuals for special diets? And if so, where does the money come from?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Honourable Member. The Honourable Member is quite right. The basic personal allowance is only one component of the budget that is made up for our social assistance clients. In there, there's shelter. We've talked about some of the return to work programs that are in place, things like up to $400 a month for childcare, $150 a month for transportation. We'll assist people if they need a pair of gloves or hard hat or work boots to go back to work. Now we're starting to get into the special needs aspect, which could be it could be a pair of glasses. It might be a hearing aid, and indeed, as the member points out, there is also consideration for people that need special diets, such as diabetics would be a classic example, or maybe somebody that has a heart condition. That is available to augment their budgets. The member is absolutely right. It is not just $180 or soon to be $184. That is the basic amount. And from that, there are other additions. And again, I point out that despite the fact that there are 16% fewer people on social assistance today than there was 3 years ago, we are still putting approximately the same amount into the program, so that amount is being shared out amongst a smaller client base, and that would account for some of the increase through special needs.
The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party.
Thank you. Again, looking at the special needs, I'm just trying to get a better understanding with regards to these personal or special needs that some individuals may have. I'm just trying to understand the process. Whether it's a special diet, whether it's glasses, whether it's dental work, whether it's for individuals from home, Madam Chair, to come up to Halifax to see a specialist. So I guess what I'm trying to find out is the process. The individual certainly will contact the caseworker. The caseworker from there will take the information. I'm trying to find out who decides, if it's the caseworker, if it's the supervisor, if it's the director or the minister. So maybe the minister could elaborate in terms of how a special need gets approved.
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Honourable Member. That would be in conjunction with the caseworker as the first line of contact with the client, and from there, if it's beyond the caseworker's authority to approve, it would go to the supervisor. Okay.
Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Many times, Madam Chair, and I'm quite sure that you've probably encountered a few of these requests as well. Some individuals have gone through their caseworker for special requests. Unfortunately, they get denied. They always, as I understand, they have a choice to appeal that decision. Appeal, Madam Chair, I haven't even heard from one individual that has gone through an appeal and won that appeal. So either it's a waste of time, either it's just a format to try to hide behind some kind of policy for the caseworker, for the supervisor, for the department when the special requests come forward. So again, understanding part of the process that the caseworker will either approve. If she doesn't have the approval, she will seek approval from another level, from supervisor or from someone else. I guess what I'm trying to find out, in terms of the appeal process, could the minister indicate exactly what the process is involved for an individual that would like to appeal a decision? how does one go about doing it?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Honourable Member. Basically, when a client or an applicant feels that they have not been treated fairly by the caseworker, they have a chance to request an administrative review of the decision. If they're not satisfied with the outcome of the administrative review, they can request to make an appeal. We try to be very accommodating. Sometimes those that are appealing do not have perhaps some of the things that we take for granted in terms of their ability to write a letter, and we certainly bend over backwards to try to accommodate them. Honourable Member, I'm going to take this opportunity to acknowledge some of your questioning by asking my communications director if she could please arrange to have 52 copies of our new Employment Support and Income Assistance Program brochure passed around. This is for your office if you need more copies to give out to constituents, but just recently through the Inclusion Initiative. Yes. Through the Inclusion Initiative led by Charlie McDonald, with a lot of consultation, we came up with this pamphlet, and I think that you'll find it's most helpful. And indeed, a lot of the information that you're asking for, in fact, is also on the website. For instance, the special diet, it actually goes up to $150 a month. So the information is there, but I hope that this is welcomed by all MLAs. So Kathy, if you could please make those arrangements.
The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to thank the Minister for offering both that information. I'm quite sure it'll be helpful. I want to get back to the budget speech on page 25. The Minister of Finance indicated again on the personal allowance for welfare recipients that this investment will increase to $2 million in next year's budget in 2005-2006. Could the Minister give us a breakdown how what they anticipate this $2 million will do? Is this $2 million, will it be all invested into personal allowance? I guess I'm just trying to get a sense in better be informed, I guess, trying to understand better what exactly people have to look forward into next year's budget. Thank you.
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If the Honourable Member would consider that $1 million covers 6 months, therefore, in order to do the same increase in the basic personal allowance for a full year, it would require twice the same amount of money, assuming the same number of cases. But Honourable Member, unless the cost of living is zero in the coming year, I can assure you that we'll be looking at that again during the budget deliberations, and I am not accepting that 184 will necessarily be the rate for next year, but I would like to think it's a guaranteed minimum for 2005-2006.
The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So actually, this increase that's being proposed in next year's budget is just to continue providing that 13 cents increase per day to these individuals in the following year. Again, on the income assistance, I have an individual from home that currently is receiving $384 a month. So, Madam Chair, just try to imagine living on $384 a month. You know, this individual calls practically every week. We have been sending letters to the Minister with regards to his allowance. You know, $384, this guy is living in a low rental. He's paying $204. Personal allowance is $180. $384 for a month. Every quarter gets an additional $51.25 in GST. So trying to live on $384, so $204 goes for his rent. So technically, he's left with $180. Now, where I'm going with this, I'm trying to find out, because for the last little while, this individual needs some dental work. As I understand, the dental policy for the department has been that the department, once this special need is approved, the department will pay 80% of the cost, and the individual has to pay 20%. Well, again, coming back to $384, there's $204 that's taken automatically off his benefits for his rent. So he's got $180 for the month to buy his food, buy his clothing, all his personal, to look after all his personal needs. But then he is expected, Madam Chair, to find 20% in order to cough up for his dental work. So my question to the minister is, I'm just trying to find out where this individual has, what's expected from him, where he needs to look for 20% to pick up the cost for his dental work. So maybe the minister could provide us with some information on, this is the department's policy, as I understand, 80%, once it's approved, the department will pick up, and the individual is left with the 20% of the cost. In a $384 budget a month, where this individual needs to look, beats me. Unfortunately, the work is not just being put off and put off. So maybe the minister could indicate to me, so I'll have an answer for this individual next time he calls, where he can find this extra 20% in his monthly allowance to cough up for his dental work.
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And first of all, I think that, to be fair, the honourable member would agree that because his constituent is in public housing, that in actual fact the value of that shelter component is considerably more than the $204. I think that most people that would probably have that level of accommodation would be spending several $100s more per month in order to get the same quality of accommodation. So to say that his total check is $384 is perhaps not recognizing that he's getting a $400 a month, say, benefit from being in public housing, or perhaps more. But what the honourable member does articulate quite well is that after covering his shelter components, his shelter costs, he is left with a basic personal allowance of $180. And that is quite so, and that is what's going up by a modest amount on October the 1st. Your specific question as it pertains to dental is very much analogous to the increase in the $4 in the basic personal allowance, because prior to August the 1st of 2001, basically the province was paying virtually nothing for dental, and in this past year we spent about $3 million through the Quick Card, which is the organization that actually manages the dental plan. So we've gone from virtually nothing to $3 million, but that does not solve your constituents' challenge. I acknowledge that. I would tell the honourable member that some dentists will waive the 20%. Some dentists will, in fact, give a certain amount of time per week for those that are unable to pay for their dental services. And some dentists, reasonably, they want their 20%. They're busy. I just say that the honourable member makes a good point. We made significant progress in there, from basically $0 to $3 million in 3 years is a significant increase in the amount that goes to dental, but it certainly does not solve everybody's dental problems by any stretch of the imagination. And like increasing the basic personal allowance by $4, it comes as no surprise that we're being criticized for moving in the right direction, but it'll always be an argument as to did we go far enough? And I appreciate the member's intervention on the behalf of his constituent.
The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, to the Minister, this individual has gone through first time around for dental work. The dentist was certainly very helpful, understood, tried to help this individual. You know, certainly it took a long time for this individual to pay the dentist his 20%. So the next time around came, and the dentist told this individual, I'm sorry, we've tried this once. You know, I had to wait a long, long time to get my 20%. No, thank you, I'm not interested, go see someone else. Well, again, you know, this individual has no transportation. There's no public transportation in Clare. So this individual, unfortunately, is pretty well restricted to the dentist in the area. So again, when he contacted his dentist to see if, again, he could make some arrangements to have some further dental work done, unfortunately, you know, we certainly understand where the dentist was coming from and the difficulties this individual is having along the way. So I'm raising this to the minister's attention. You know, surely there has to be some way, a process to allow some certainly special consideration, I guess, the fact that there are special needs that are being submitted through caseworkers to their supervisors. I guess for this individual's sake, there are special cases that need special consideration. So I'm asking the minister to bring it back to his department. You know, I'm quite sure that somehow, somewhere, they should be able to provide some special consideration for this type of situation. So I want to move on to another question that was raised. It's language barrier. Through you, Madam Chair, to the Minister, the Digby County Community Services Office, we have caseworkers, we have bilingual caseworkers, and we have unilingual caseworkers. I know recently, just actually 2 weeks ago, and I knew that we would have the opportunity to raise this in the House, and I indicated to this individual that he earlier had a caseworker that he could communicate with, was French. He had no problem in communicating. But the fact that this individual's been, I guess, reassigned somewhere else in the county, looking after another area of the county, of course, this individual was left with a new caseworker that was English. And of course, this individual was very upset, very frustrated, was yelling, was screaming. 2 weeks ago when I was over to visit this individual. And I was listening to the story, and at the same time I was trying to understand, you know, trying to provide your situation or explain your situation to a caseworker in a foreign language that you're not comfortable with, in a foreign language that you have a hard time to communicate with, but yet, you know, this individual somehow is able to try to establish some type of relationship that's practically, it's just impossible, you know, before it all starts. So, you know, I guess what I'm looking for is some direction from this minister. It's certainly something that I will be spending a little more attention to. You know, this is the first time that it has been raised to my knowledge. You know, previously, as I've indicated, Madam Chair, we had caseworkers that were bilingual. This problem never came up since I've been in this job, practically in the last 11 years. But the fact that some individual in the department or that was looking after individuals from my area has been now reassigned to somewhere else within that office. Naturally, the supervisor is trying to, you know, rearrange the the staff to try to cover and provide that service. But unfortunately, this is certainly very, very upsetting for this individual, and I suspect if it's happening to one, probably it's happening to more individuals from my area that have difficulties speaking English, and then at the same time, on the province-wide scale, chances are that this could be happening in other Acadian communities throughout this province. So I'm asking the minister if he's willing to take it back to his department and maybe raise this concern. I know it's not going to happen overnight, but I want to bring the minister's attention to this problem. I would like to ask the minister to bring this concern back to his department and maybe look into it, and hopefully maybe some arrangements can be worked out to try to provide a service to these individuals that are uncomfortable, unable to communicate in English to their caseworker. So I'll take my seat and I'll give the minister an opportunity to respond, please.
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Honourable Member. And in fact, this has been brought to my attention on previous occasions, not only in the District of Clare, but clearly Argyll, Cheticamp, and many other Acadian communities in the province. And in fact, we are looking at making sure that that service can be made available where numbers warrant in a person's mother tongue. And in essence, what we're talking about is addressing the needs of our Acadian citizens. I would appreciate it if the member opposite would perhaps provide the name of that individual constituent to George Hudson afterwards. George has taken a note, and I've asked him to please make sure that that concern is relayed back to the office, because that is a very legitimate concern, and it is a service that should be available in Acadian communities in French. Honourable Member, you had asked early on about what was the source of the market basket measure. You were asking about where did we come up with $135. And in fact, it was developed by Human Resources Development Canada. They contracted it out to Stats Canada to gather the information, so it's federal.
Thank you, Minister. Recognize the member from Clare.
Thank you, Madam Mr. Chairman. Again, I want to thank the Minister for his commitment to look into this. Yes, I will provide the Minister with the name of the individual. I'm going to be sharing my time with my colleague from Cape Breton West. I want to, before I move off, I want to go back to the income assistance payment, supplementary detail, page 4.11. 2003-2004, $223 million was spent, and or was actually the estimate, and we know by the forecast of last year, $227 million was spent. So we're looking at practically a $4 million increase. So could the minister indicate why an additional $4 million was spent? And then I guess my second part to that question is, looking at the estimate for this current year, the budget is at $224 million. So we know that the personal allowances are going up $1 million. So I anticipate that's the $1 million increase from last year to this year. But then I'm looking at the actual amount that was spent last year, $227 million. So could the minister indicate to us, what brought this additional $4 million in expenses? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I'd like to recognize the Minister of Community Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I thank the member opposite for his question. It's an appropriate question to be asking in the estimates. Basically, the budget is based on a forecast of a certain caseload, and while we were close to the forecast, the the numbers did not drop quite as much as we thought they would, and accordingly, that's where the extra $4 million comes from. We do expect a very marginal drop in the numbers, but I think that, again, in 2004, 2005, but I think the honourable member perhaps had made the point earlier on that the core that's left in the 32,000 people that still are on community services, a great number of them are basically they're on long-term disability, and their opportunity for employment is curtailed as such, and so it becomes more difficult to make further progress in reducing that number. I think it's fair to say that there are always going to be some people in transition, and about 50% of that number would account for that. So it's all got to do with anticipated caseloads.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the member from Clare for his questioning this afternoon. And now at this time, we'd like to recognize the member from Cape Breton West, still from the Liberal caucus. And member, you have approximately 21 minutes left in your turn. And then we're going to switch to the NDP caucus, which at that time will have 4 minutes before the time is finished with estimates today. Member from Cape Breton West has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a few small questions. With regards to the federal-provincial housing agreement, the minister indicated in the House a little more than a week ago that a lot of exciting things were happening in the Department of Housing. And he went on to say about the new housing units that were signed into agreement. As I understand, the total number of housing units that have been signed in to date is 21. Is that correct, or is the number higher?
Question and direct that to the Minister of Community Services.
Yes, I thank the honourable member for pointing that out. We've had a fair amount of discussion already on that in the estimates, and in terms of the targets and the time frame, the rollout, what needed to be done to get to the stage where we started putting out the request for proposals, and the various ways that we're going to invest that $37.26 million.
Thank you, Minister. I recognize the member from Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The minister didn't answer my question. How many have been signed into the agreement out of the 1,400 so far? Have been either started or signed to be committed to be built?
Thank you for the question. Recognize the Minister of Community Services.
The specific number is fluid because, as the member would be aware, there was a home preservation program that we announced at the end of the year, and by the end of the year there were 26. There was some 26 homes that qualified for this, and in fact, the average amount going to each home was close to $40,000. So if you take that, you take the 15 that are built and now occupied in Middleton, you take the 6 that are under construction in Creighton Garish. Those of what was done as of March the 31st. I'm not able to answer your question today because the home preservation program is an ongoing program.
Thank you. Recognize the member from Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In total, what the minister has just indicated, that 3.3% of the 1,400 homes have been constructed, even if you want to expand into the home preservation terminology that you used or whatever, because you have 40, 44, 47 out of 1,400. That's about 3.3%. So at this rate, the minister and the government would have to construct somewhere close to 40 units a month for the remainder of the agreement. Does the minister realistically believe that he's going to achieve that goal?
The Minister of Community Services.
Budget this year, 7 point. 7.7. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And in actual fact, yes, we're very conscious of the timelines, and I will reiterate our commitment that we will invest all the monies that are required to fully exhaust the $18.63 million of matching federal monies by the cutoff date of March the 31st of 2006, and the monies actually have to be expended by March the 31st, 2007. This year, we're anticipating $7,550,000 to go into the program, and the balance will follow in the subsequent years. Of course, we've already put several million into the program, so we're starting to make progress.
The member from Cape Breton West.
The minister's indicating he's confident he's going to spend the 7.3 million, 7.5 this year. Where will those units be constructed?
Minister of Community Services.
Again, the program is not all for the construction of rental housing. We've got 4 components. We've got the home ownership in urban areas of revitalization, and that's the Creighton Garish. That's a very small part of the program, but it's an important part. It's where areas that we want to encourage some home ownership and to provide that mix that creates a healthy community. In addition to that, we've got the home preservation program, and that's for the amount that exceeds the amount of the $16,000 for the rural residential assistance program. That's what I was referencing earlier, and indeed some of these repair bills are coming in very high, and basically that stock would have been housing stock would have been lost to the province, to the owner, unless those investments were made, and putting the 16 in under wrap would have just not done the job. In addition to that, we've got the rental preservation program, which actually accounts for 25% of the $37.26 million. And in essence, there we're talking